hosts, myself, Tim, and you've got Lachlan.
G'day.
And Ruben.
G'day. 2022 is upon us.
It is, and I am using my Mad Cup to have a beer during 2022. Not just any beer.
That's the Christmas mug. Yeah.
Schofferhofer.
Very nice. Very nice.
So Ruben and I both got same sort of mug for Christmas, which is something our wives teed up. So it's a big, for those listening who can't see, imagine a big timber-looking mug with a stainless steel inside that holds about 3/4 of a litre, and it looks like it's out of a World of Warcraft movie. It's a really mad mug. So
that's cool.
Awesome. What beer have you got in your one, Ruben?
Heineken.
Nice. And Lachlan, what are you drinking?
I'm back on the G&T, so I'm actually with some of your Mudgy gin that you gave us. So I'm back on that one, which is good. I was going to break out a new rum, which I bought a cheap-ass mixer with, and it tastes terrible with the cheap-ass mixer. So I'm going to go back and do it justice and buy a proper mixer and reevaluate next time.
You were before the show. We were laughing at Lachlan because you go out and spend all this money on a nice spirit, and then you cheap out on the mixer. You save yourself $1.20.
Ridiculous, totally ridiculous.
Yeah. You put ice in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well. Okay. Well, the book. Seemed like a distant memory a couple of weeks ago, so I picked it up and reread the first half of chapter 10 that we're working through tonight, and even after doing that I still had to watch a little summary video online just to remind my brain what was going on.
Cheater.
Well, look, a lot happened, as you know. My daughter broke her ankle while we were away on holidays camping, and that resulted in surgery, and so that was very distracting. I bought a boat, which was pretty awesome. Yep. Do you want to hear the joke that people keep saying to me about buying the boat?
Now you got to buy a jet?
No, it's buying a boat is one of the 2 best days of your life. The other best day is selling it.
Heard that many a time.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, I've got a British car, and it's 68 years old, and I've still got that, so, and I'm quite happy with it.
How much harder can a boat be, right? Surely.
Well, it hasn't been built by British Leyland, so that's a start.
That's a good start.
Engine's a Yamaha, so it should have some Japanese reliability.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'll be good to drag the kids around and go fishing and all that sort of stuff.
Is the engine in your boat, how much bigger is it than the engine in your car, the yellow one?
Well, see, this is it's not that simple. So, in theory,
of course it is.
In theory, my Austin has 30 horses because it's called an A30. This motor is 25 horsepower, but, and there's a big but, that's a Japanese less than 10-year-old 25 horsepower versus an English calculated 68-year-old 30 horsepower. So I'm saying that the Japanese motor more than likely has a lot more power.
What you're saying, Tim, is engine swap. The engine from the boat's going in the car.
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea at all. How about you guys? Did you do anything interesting over the Christmas break?
I know the whole family got COVID. That was fun. There's nothing too drastic from it. Pretty much everybody got it, but most of us had pretty mild sort of symptoms. my son was had a pretty high temperature for about 48 hours, and then he was sort of okay. My wife was crook for about 2 or 3 days, but not terrible. We're a bit worried about my mother-in-law just because she hasn't got a great immune system. But she just had her third vax 2 weeks before catching COVID, so she's about as good a position as you could be in to get it
for her age and health and likewise.
Yeah, for all that sort of stuff. So and she
good stuff.
So it wasn't too bad. But I must say, like, some weird sort of lingering symptoms sort of still going on. So just had like sort of fatigue pretty bad for several weeks sort of following. And I think I mentioned this to you guys on the chat, but I've been getting really weird motion sickness playing video games. And
yeah, you were saying that.
Yeah, I'm still getting it.
Did that kick in after the COVID?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I've never had problems with that sort of thing, and it's not just one game. I did turn off that motion blur setting, which you guys all called me a noob for leaving on.
I leave it on. I leave it on. I like motion blur.
There you go. That helped a little bit, but yeah, it's something weird. But even today, we went to the beach, and we were just like floating about on the water, and within 30 minutes, I was starting to feel motion sick, like floating on some like barely moving water. So yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's a bit weird, but
well, there's another symptom too, which is you're starting to find Saabs desirable.
He did. Yeah, he did link a Saab.
I was kind of like baiting you a little bit, Tim, because I know you hate them.
I don't actually hate them. My
Your
dad
man
hates
does
them.
that, right?
And I know if I buy one, I'm out of the will. Like, inheritance gone. That's just a forbidden fruit. I can't go there.
Sure.
Wow, I bet you there's a story behind that.
Yeah, he's an auto electrician, and as much as he hates my fetish with English cars and Lucas Electrics, they don't hold a light to Saabs. He hates Saabs.
He reckons they're the worst, huh?
He refused to work on them when he was in his last auto electrician job, and told his boss that he would quit before he worked on one. So it's just not going there. So
Very cool.
well, so I've just noticed, Lachlan, you're wearing a Mighty Car Mods shirt.
I am indeed. Got my
That's the,
chopped fingers up.
Chopped logo.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do love the Almighty Car Mods. They're good folks.
Yeah, they're good fun. Have you seen any of their stuff, Ruben?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, have a look at them. They're Sydney guys. They got a massive cult following, and they're really, really good at what they do.
I'll have to check it out.
Been on YouTube for about 15 years, so
Yeah.
long time.
How about you, Ruben? Anything interesting over Chrissy?
No, Chrissy was really good. Had a week or two off here, and just had last week off. Yeah, no, it was really good.
Nice.
Nothing super exciting happened.
Yeah. Well, let's open the book.
Blow the
We
dust off
usually
it,
do
mate.
a recap, but I don't remember what happened last.
I think
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I think they were trying to sort of sum up right at the end of book 9. Some of those reasons. They were looking for that. I suppose like the facts around why the just way of living is a better way of living, and I don't know. They went over some basically sort of rehashed a whole bunch of stuff that they'd sort of been through before. But if you remember, there was a whole there's a fact about the how many times happier someone. God, I'm terrible. I can't remember the name of it. Someone in that.
So
Yeah, they do some mathematical equation, right?
The mathematical
tyrannical
number.
mind versus somebody who's of
Yeah. That's it. Sorry, thanks for helping me out there.
aristocratic mind, and he put a number on it, 77 or something ridiculous.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's right. It was if you're coming from like a aristocracy, you know, versus the tyranny, and yeah. So they were just trying to, I guess, make the case that you're going to be sort of better off in a just society, in a better sort of society, and that's really where they kind of wrapped it all up. So it kind of felt like as you're going into book 10 that they were going to kind of like pivot off that and really sort of hammer home what is justice and why is justice better. But
there's a detour again. Yeah. Before we move on to the detour, I know you were listening to it, Ruben. I don't know if you've had a listen, Lachlan, but there was the Joe Rogan interviewing Jordan Peterson episode last week. And right towards the end of that 4 hour and 15-minute marathon,
Finally, it got good towards the end, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like sitting in my car, like talking to the show, going, freaking read The Republic. Because they were talking about, do you know the part I was talking about, Ruben, where they're talking about the tyrant? And Peterson was arguing with Rogan about how, like, the tyrant can't...
That's right, Peterson's saying,
they're successful.
They're not successful, and Rogan's, well, they kind of are successful.
He's like, they are successful. They've got everything they want. He's like, no, they haven't. And
it depends on what you mean by successful.
Yeah. I was like, read this book. Read this book. It's right there, Rogan. Yeah. It's right there. So, yeah, that was good fun.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing.
Mm. So, tables. Coffee tables.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. The first half of the last chapter is about the question of what is art. You know, and the main thrust of this section is this Socrates having a go at the poets again, which I always like.
And it's kind of funny. I mean, it's like he just thought he'd take a moment, I think, because they were like sort of patting themselves on the back for the conclusions they got at the end of chapter 9. It's like, we've kind of proved that, you know, you're better off in a just society, and so now I'm just going to go back and bask in the glory of some other work that we did that I was pretty proud of, and that was Smashing Poets. So,
before we go, I just want to make sure everyone understands that you shouldn't listen to poets.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of how it goes.
Or painters.
Yeah, well, he does incorporating the lot, really, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But
so let's lay out what he says, and then we can talk about why we agree or disagree.
Sure.
Well, he starts off by sort of dancing around it a little bit, because he's pointing out the fact that he loves the tragedians like Homer, and that he's basically a big fan, but sort of more or less sort of says that you know, whilst he's a big fan of Homer, he's a bigger fan of the truth, so he's going to have to speak his mind and diss the poets.
Early on, I like how he says such representations definitely harm the mind of their audience unless they're inoculated against them by knowing their true nature. So basically, they're basically saying, well, yeah, their work is good, but, you know, if you're not inoculated against knowing what these pretenders really are, it's gonna be harmful to you.
Yeah, and so I guess he's just pointing at the fact straight up that they're not in the business of necessarily providing truth, perhaps just entertainment. And you know, if you don't know the difference between the two, then you could be in trouble.
True. But he sort of goes about trying to explain what all art is. And he basically says that it's representation. It's just a representation of another thing, which kind of just sounds a bit obvious in some ways.
Yeah. and I guess like he's a big fan of doing things by threes, so he kind of like breaks down that representation a little bit to categorize things. So he's saying of any particular thing, there's three creators, and he starts out by sort of saying, well, the ultimate creator is God, because God creates everything in the natural world. And I guess, he's doing this on the basis around talking about a bed, isn't he? And using
we could use cups because I have some.
Sure.
So you could say, in my hands right now, I have a glass stein and a timber stein.
Yeah.
And both of them are a stein, but they are both different from each other. So his point is, God had the original idea of a stein, of
Yes.
the idea of stein, and then people make variants of stein, who are the people that make the cups.
Yeah.
And then there's the artists who would paint the cup.
Yeah,
So
or describe it in a poem, or make a sculpture.
So the two tiers removed from the original idea.
That's right. Yeah. And his whole point is basically that because the artist is that third tier down, they're representing something that they don't really understand because they didn't make it. That they've got, what would you say, limited credibility.
Yeah. Which is why, and I think I don't know if it makes a lot of sense from the purpose of an object, but once he moves it into like courage, that's kind of where it makes a lot more sense.
I tell you where
I thought of it the opposite.
Oh, did
so
you?
My immediate impression was it makes sense when you're talking about physical objects, but I thought his argument fell apart when you start talking about virtues.
Oh, there's no way I thought you would have thought that. So you know how you hate George R. R. Martin because he's a conscription dodger?
That's a gross misrepresentation of why I hate him.
Right? So, because I know you don't rate him, right? But you rate Tolkien.
No.
Tolkien can write
Correct.
about war and courage because he went through it.
He went to war.
George R. R. Martin can't. So that's why it made sense. Like the penny dropped for me when I read that part. I'm like, Ruben's argument of why he hates George R. R. Martin actually makes this make sense for me.
Hate's a strong word. I just don't find him credible.
Well, there you go. No, I don't think Socrates would either.
Well, he wouldn't, because that's exactly the kind of slander he's throwing at Homer and saying, well, Homer, have you ever been a tactician in war? You write about it a lot, but have you ever actually done it?
Yeah, he's like, if you were really good at it, then that's what you'd be doing. But you're not. You're writing poems.
Yep. Yeah, so he's sort of implying that he's like captured the topics and the imaginations about this stuff, but the truth has been removed in that process because he's not actually done the thing. So basically he's saying that anyone who writes about something that they've not actually done before is an imitator. And so, they're just not a credible source of truth.
There you go. So I think that sums up almost everything in this first half of the book. What do you think? Because it's a pretty straightforward idea.
That's roughly where he's at with it. Yeah, I guess if you wanted to summarize it, he's like you said, he's like, there's the idea of the thing, and that's in God's mind. So the idea of a chair or a bed or a cup, and then you have the person who can make a chair, a bed, chair, or a cup, and then you've got the artist who will represent it in some other way. So, and he more or less says, well, the person who makes the thing is going to have a better understanding of it, but then he also goes on to say that the person who uses the thing has the greatest understanding of the thing, and that's why he uses the example of flutes, where a flute might go to a flute maker and go, can you do this or that to make it better for me to use? But essentially the artist that represents those things has the lowest level of knowledge. So
Sorry, go Lachlan.
Where I think, as I was saying earlier, where I think that makes sense for physical objects but makes less sense for abstract objects is because I think it's fair to say yeah, all right, an artist who may be able to paint a cup may not really know the best way to manufacture one, may not know the best aspects of a cup. I think that's different when it comes to human experience. And one of the main things that artists do is discuss and represent human experience and the human condition. And then, being humans, they would have experienced those things. So while they may not be able to tell you how to be a general, they would at least have some understanding of what it's like to exercise courage. So I think for me, that's where I kind of look at it and go, well, maybe if someone hasn't directly experienced that particular thing, they would have some idea of what those things are.
You're probably right, but I guess it just depends on what their intention would be as well. Like if you think about this in I was going to say a modern context, but maybe modern's not the right word, but let's say a real context. I'd ask you the question, what does Jesus look like? So art has provided us with an image of a mostly white man with blue eyes, beard, and long flowing hair that a dude in a metal band would be stoked to have, when historians indicate that he probably looked nothing like that at all.
Yeah.
And apparently that image of how most people think of Jesus comes from some artwork in 400 AD depicting Jesus symbolically, but not actually trying to physically represent him with the truth of his physicality.
Right.
And I suppose that's just kind of demonstrating maybe Socrates' point of view that art doesn't necessarily represent the truth of the thing, and if you're not aware of that, then it can sort of divert you from the truth. I don't know. What do you reckon?
I get his argument, but I think he's wrong. And the reason I think he's wrong is he uses abstract ideas or examples that aren't real to prove his point every single time, just about. Like, this whole republic, this pretend city he's made up, it's all once upon a time. We've got to create this creation story somehow and make people not remember life before it, and then have these tears, and it's all like the way that he gets to any of the answers for the question of what is justice. It's all through a similar process that Tolkien would take with writing the Lord of the Rings and trying to demonstrate, principles of morality and courage. And
that's right. In
Lord
of the Rings, he's got the character of Boromir who gives in to temptation and then tries to seek redemption. Well, nobody's going to sit there and go, well, Tolkien, if you actually done those things, and if you haven't, you can't write about it.
True.
Yeah.
So I think
I
agree.
think he's got a blind spot to
you.
his own to his own technique.
Yeah.
And I think he realizes that what he's doing is essentially the same process. It's just less creative.
But would he argue back against that, saying what he's describing? Because you know how he's talking about his different levels of truth, and he's talking about forms being the highest level of truth. He talks about there being a system, and he's talking about the dialectic and leaving the cave and staring into the sun, and he's saying, so there is a way to access that truth, and that's through philosophy. So I'm guessing, and it might be uncharacteristically arrogant of him, but I'm guessing he would say, yeah, but I'm a philosopher, and I've got these systems, and that's how I access truth. So when I'm talking about it, I'm not talking out of my ass. Which is a little hard to swallow, because that's just like, they're not experts, but I am, so listen to me.
but then could you not say that therefore he would agree that actually, so then he would agree that Tolkien has authority to speak on the horrors of war and courage, and Martin does not.
He probably would, yeah. I tend to agree with him, but I don't. That's more or less because I don't like George R. R. Martin.
Well, what I think he's sort of saying is maybe like that art is okay as long as that it is representing the real and the true,
Yeah.
rather than saying all art and poetry is garbage. Art and poetry is fine as long as it's true.
Do you think he would object to someone making songs from the book? Do you think he would
From
approve of this conversation? Like, I know it's Plato's writing. Do you think he would approve of this?
someone turning it into a song? Yeah, why not?
I think he wouldn't, because he'd say, well, you've changed my words to make them rhyme, and then it loses the meaning.
Well, all you do is
he,
give it to
he
someone
does
like
kind
Eminem
of
or Snoop, who
address
just
that.
makes
He
words
talks...
fit anyway.
Yes. Um, well, he does kind of address that, because there's a section, I don't know whether I can find it, where he's talking about music and also poetry, and he's saying that the music kind of elicits feelings, but if you take the words they're saying and take the music out of it, they sort of lose their impact. And I think that you could say that's particularly true with today's music. Like if you take any number of modern music, any of the music, and just read the words deadpan without the beat or the rhythm behind it, it's just nonsense. Like, it's
Yeah,
rubbish.
yeah, for sure.
But I think he also touches on that a bit too when he starts talking about the motives. He's like, oh, ultimately, if you're making art, you're going to make it so that it appeals to people. So they're going to be making what appeals to people and not making something that illustrates the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I found this really interesting, and this he was leading to this from he was really starting to talk about, I think, Stoicism as much as
Yeah,
anything. And I think he used an example around grief and saying how the right and reasonable way your mind would rationalize and deal with grief would be quite practical. Like, so you would work through it and look for solutions and things like that, right?
yeah,
And the irrational part of your mind, or your wild side, or whatever it is, would allow you to wallow and carry on and do all this sort of thing. And I think that was the rebellious principle, I think he was calling it. And I think he was basically pointing out that anyone who's providing this stuff as entertainment doesn't want to watch a Stoic because it's boring. And they just want sensationalized stuff. So it makes more sense to focus on the kind of stuff.
the extremes. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's 100% accurate. And you see it in TV today. I mean, how much stuff is there that's centering around debauchery and poor behavior in reality TV that's super popular, right? Um, because it's sensational, and you're really going to tune in to watch the boring life of sensible such and such with their family of well-behaved children going through, I don't know, dealing with things in a rational, calm manner. I mean, it wouldn't make for good viewing, would it?
Well, who's a
no,
stoic superhero? I mean,
what's that?
at first I thought, who's a stoic superhero? At first I thought Batman's like stoic, and then I'm like, oh no, he's not stoic. He's like full of rage.
I know who's stoic. It's Thanos, mate.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah. Yep. That's very
I
good.
found the quote about the thing. So great is the natural magic of music and poetry. Strip it of its poetic colouring, reduce it to plain prose, and I think you know how little it amounts to. It's like take away all the fancy bit, and it's just empty.
All style, no substance.
Yeah. I I think that's true a lot of the time, particularly like you said, Lachlan, if they're making it for the sake of entertainment and popularity. But I
Mm.
don't, and I don't even know whether Socrates would say it doesn't. But I don't think that applies to all art and all artists, because
Yeah.
you would find some artists who are just trying to convey truth, or just essentially just being too brutally honest, and you probably
Mm.
find that sometimes that is popular, but you probably also find a lot of the time that it's, like you say, it's just not. Maybe they just don't make it.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I guess there still can be truth in tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Um, because there are real tragic circumstances that happen in the world all the time. Um, so, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think you can paint everything with that brush, if you pardon the pun. Um, yeah, look, I think he's just trying to, as usual, sort of angle towards what is true is okay, and everything else just doesn't fit the sort of society that they idealize.
Oh yeah, yeah. He does come back to that.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
seem to be pretty well agreed that the artist knows little or nothing about the subject he represents, and that the art of representation is something that has no serious value. And this applies above all to tragic poets, epics, and dramatic.
Well, I think he's right. I mean, if you watch Days of Our Lives, that doesn't feel very real.
Yeah.
True, true. Yeah, yeah,
Like that sort of
yeah.
weak show is pretty ordinary, but yeah, I still
Yeah.
think overall not wanting to have art is a mistake.
I, I agree, but I understand the angle he's coming from. But as you said, Tim, it's this process of refinement that he goes through artificially to sort of arrive at these things. But um, yeah, because I mean, he admits himself he loves it, right?
Yeah.
But he thinks in their utopian society they shouldn't have it. But he loves it. But
Yeah, I feel like he would have a private collection or the restricted access library section, like in Harry Potter, and that would have some in there.
yeah, yeah. There's another little quote in there too. And does not the latter, I mean the rebellious principle, furnish a great variety of materials for imitation, whereas the wise and calm temperate, being always nearly equable, is not easy to imitate or appreciate when imitated, especially at a public festival where a promiscuous crowd is assembled in a theatre. For the feeling represented is one to which they are strangers. I think he sort of nails that pretty well, but you can't cast everything in with that in with that lot. It's just a gross generalization, but you can see where he's coming from, though. I suppose.
Well, I watched over the break. I watched the most recent version of Macbeth, the one with Denzel Washington, which is really good, by the
Oh,
way. He's so good in
I
that.
was going to say, I'd
Um,
heard it was awesome. Mm.
yeah. I'll have to go back and watch the other one. There's another famous dude. One did a couple of years back. I don't really remember it. Anyway, it's a good adaptation. But in in that, my understanding of it is essentially putting these characters in um, in a moral framework, and what goes wrong is in part because they're not complying with that framework. So, you know what I mean? They decide to kill a king to take the power, and then to some extent, one becomes a monster, and his wife, who talked him into it, gets eaten by guilt, ends up killing herself. Um,
Mm.
but what you've got, what you got there, is kind of like a framework. Um, and I guess you could debate whether that framework is true or not. But if it is true, then you can look at what happens to the characters, and you could say that that represents the truth, if that makes any sense. So it's not. I don't
Mm.
think it's as simple as just like you know, is he describing grief correctly, or is he describing it in a way that, you know, is beneficial to people? But because I think there's, in a sense, these different ideas relate to each other, and they do in a way which is universal. So if an artist taps into that framework and they write about that framework, then they could write any number of works that would convey truth. That's probably all a little bit abstract, but that's probably where I disagree with Socrates.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, he does actually sort of cross himself up a little bit, because whilst he's sort of angling on truth, when he sort of comes to the wrap up with what they're talking about here, it's not so much about truth, but more about conditioning and behavior amongst a population. And it's, I think, it's not as much maybe about truth, but as setting an example of form that people should aspire to, and not allowing people to normalize what he considers to be bad behavior in a society.
Yeah, it could almost be interpreted as him saying, you know, I don't want people influencing in a way that I don't agree with.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. There's one sort of final sort of excerpt that I grabbed, so I'll read that one out.
All right, welcome back. Sorry, guys, we had a technical difficulty where the software crashed. We're back. So where were you up to there, Lachlan?
Yeah, so I just had a quote to sort of wrap this part up. So I'll read it now. And now we may fairly take him and place him by the side of the painter, for he is like him in two ways. First, inasmuch as his creations have an inferior degree of truth in this, I say he is like him. And he is also like him in being concerned with an inferior part of the soul, and therefore shall be right in refusing to admit him to a well-ordered state, because he awakens and nourishes and strengthens the feelings and impairs the reason. As in a city, when the evil are permitted to have authority and the good are put out of the way, so in the soul of a man, as we maintain, the imitative poet implants an evil constitution, for he indulges the irrational nature which has no discernment of greater and less, but thinks the same thing at one time great and another small. He is a manufacturer of image and is very far removed from the truth. There's a pretty scolding wrap up there.
Yeah, I think he's spot on, particularly the bit about appealing to people's emotions rather than their sense of reason. That's definitely what a lot of art does.
Yeah, I mean, it's designed to tap in and make you feel something. That's exactly what art's about. And yeah, I guess that sort of possibly could go against the grain of what they're trying to achieve, depending on what that emotion or what that feeling is. But,
it's a bit strange, because when you think of civilizations, the art usually is part of their identity, usually defines them. Like you think about Soviet Russia, or like Germany during World War II, the Romans. Like there's always, for those sort of, I don't know to say empires, but for powerful nations or nations that are run in a strict way, generally there is the use of art and propaganda.
Yeah, look, I guess it's different through the ages, isn't it? How art is used, or what it's for, and what's left at the end of a civilization. I'm curious, like, using that sort of framework, you know, what legacy of art we're leaving with our current society. Lots of dumb TikTok videos, I think.
Yep, cat videos.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I know there's lots of great artists, and there's lots of people doing things, but I don't know, maybe we're in the midst of kind of celebrating the individual rather than, I don't know, what's representative of our society as art these days. That's a pretty hard thing. I mean, because you look at the Renaissance and you can sort of say that's a thing, and we can recognize it as of that period. And I don't know, but is that a style rather than a structure or substance or message or something?
Well, does it sort of come back to earlier on where he talked about that myth, right? He wanted to spread that myth for the sake of, I guess, unifying his perfect state. He would have almost certainly had to have used art to do that because there was nothing solid he could point to.
For sure.
And he was pretty explicit in saying he wanted that because it would unify, give them a character.
So you're saying, Rubes, we need a noble lie to unify our current civilization, do we?
Yes, yeah, but it doesn't have to be a lie. I do
Sure.
think a civilization needs something to unify it. And I think, and what you touched on a moment ago about sort of celebrating the individual, I think that is a bit of a problem. There really isn't anything unifying us at the moment. Like, you wouldn't be able to point to one piece of art and go, oh, that's very indicative of what Western civilization is at the moment. Because for that reason, there isn't really anything that unifies us anymore. And I think you're right. When you look back at other times, there were things like you say the Renaissance. It's typified by that a certain style, but it was all highly religious because they were unified. The unifying ideas were basically the Catholic Church.
I wonder, maybe it's just that this age is too young, and that what this age is about is mass globalization and homogenizing culture across the world. That sounds really bad. I don't necessarily mean it in a bad way, but what I mean is, I guess, like in a globalized world, if you fast forward our society 1,000 years, right? Because you think about some of the ancient Greeks or whatever, that's how long some of their, like, how long a society may have lasted, right? And say this is still our society in 1,000 years' time. Globalization is only going to continue to sort of accelerate. So I wonder if our world will actually be more unified around something, or our culture is more similar across all corners of the globe.
I think they're hoping that space travel might be that.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced globalization's going to happen. There's a lot of people that don't want that.
For sure.
Trump proved that, so did Johnson. Brexit proved that. There's a whole lot of people that don't want to go global.
Oh yeah, there's a real streak of nationalisation going on at the moment. But I mean, 1,000 years is a long time, right? So
oh yeah,
I think you touched on something there too. I think there almost certainly are people who want that kind of globalization, and I think they probably want something to unify. And like Tim says, one of those things might be space travel. Another one I think that you see is like the global warming stuff. I do think they kind of look at that science of it all aside as potentially a way to unify different countries under one goal.
Yeah, certainly. I think having a common goal is something that could be used to unify people. That's for sure.
100%.
Yeah, but no, it's interesting. I think right now, I don't think there's anything that you'd look at to think of art representing our culture. But yeah, in time, we may see it. I don't know.
I think they realise they've done themselves a little bit of an oopsie daisy though, because they start thinking about bringing back in the poets, but only under certain conditions.
Yeah, I mean, they
So
basically throw out a backflip, don't they?
Yeah, so I'll read this bit out and go from there. So it says, and now since we have reverted to the subject of poetry, let this our defence serve to show the reasonableness of our former judgment in sending away out of our state an art having the tendencies which we have described, for reason constrained us, but that she may impute to us any harshness or want of politeness. Let us tell her that there is an ancient quarrel between philosophy and poetry, of which there are many proofs, such as the saying of the yelping hound howling at her lord, or of one mighty in the vain talk of fools, and the mob of sages circumventing Zeus, and the subtle thinkers who are beggars after all, and there are innumerable other signs of ancient enmity between them. Notwithstanding this, let us assure our sweet friend and the sister arts of imitation that if she will only prove her title to exist in a well-ordered state, we shall be delighted to receive her. We are very conscious of her charms, but we may not on that account betray the truth. I dare say, Glaucon, that you are as much charmed by her as I am, especially when she appears in Homer. Yes, indeed, I am greatly charmed. Shall I propose then that she be allowed to return from exile, but upon this condition only, that she make a defence of herself in lyrical or some other metre? So yeah, it's a massive backflip right at the end there.
Yeah.
What do you make of that, Ruben?
I don't know whether it's like a total backflip as such. I think he's just going back to what he said earlier about there's going to be certain types of poetry allowed, provided they fit within that framework of society that we're building. So yeah, I don't know how they would propose to have those artists represent the truth better. I don't know. I would have been interesting to hear him say, well, yeah, you can make art about war, but you had to have gone to war or something like that, considering they had an entire class dedicated to war. So maybe they could have plucked them from that class.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, I think that's about it from the first half of this book.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
We did alright for a first run back.
Yeah, I feel a bit rusty. The computer's letting us down big time tonight for those listening. It's looking like a slideshow at times on my screen. I think that might just be a month of the computer not getting updates, and every time I disable things it starts updating some other piece of software. So it's probably just turning up processor power and bandwidth. But that's the way it goes. But before we go, I reckon we still have to do what we do and head on down to the pub for lots of us.
Excellent.
So I'll insert our music here.
Have you got a surprise question for us this week?
Surprise question. I do. So I'm holding up a Lego replica of the International Space Station.
Cool.
Now, God had the idea of the first space station. Then people built space stations, and then artists make space stations. What does that make me if I'm assembling a Lego version of a space station? Where does that fit?
I think that depends on if you're, aware of the charms of someone speaking the truth or speaking falsely, Tim.
I don't know.
It's false.
All I know
because...
is that if I actually wanted to build a real space station, I wouldn't go to you with your knowledge of the Lego one.
That's probably
I just want to know
a
if
good
the
decision.
Lego designers have actually been on a space station before they built a model of it.
Well, I don't know. I wonder. We need to find that out. I wonder if someone on the space station has built the space station Lego kit. That would
You'd
be
want to hope so, surely.
in 0G. Build it in 0G.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
wouldn't
would be the most
Lego
frustrating
be a nightmare?
exercise. Yeah, it'd be awful.
Oh yeah, yeah. It would have to be each piece in its own individual container, like old people's medication in those pop out things. But just like a 1,000 medication packet. Click this one next.
It'd take about 10 rocket launches to get all of the pieces up to you, just from all the packaging required to separate each individual piece.
Yeah. Oh, now the other thing, I was watching Boba Fett, and there's a spaceship that appears in the most recent episode, which I won't do any spoilers, but it looks slick. Looks very slick. It occurred to me, if like we're releasing satellites in space now. Like Musk is able to throw his rockets up there and drop these satellites up there. He should build a freaking Millennium Falcon or something, because once it's in space, it doesn't matter what shape it is. He should build one, launch it inside his space rocket into orbit, and then it just goes like all he needs is a moon base or a second space station, and just get it to fly backwards and forwards between the two things. The marketing for that would be insane. And then get it to do like a low orbit pass over Earth, and everyone can go, look, there's an X-Wing. How sick would that be? Sign me up.
Mate, my kids would be all over that. We're currently drowning in Star Wars toys at the minute. So ships, action figures, all three of my boys just mad for it, and it's just tiny little guns and weapons all over the carpet.
Star Wars is awesome.
Yeah, the kids have gotten into it big time. Kobe's watched all the Mandalorian, and he's been hanging out for every single episode of Boba Fett. So he's just at the right age to enjoy that stuff now. And the younger brothers are still watching like the Lego Star Wars stuff more so, but they get it. They're enjoying it too.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
No, so anyway, that was my pub philosophers conversation. It's about Lego.
Nice one.
So, all right, well, let's wrap it up, and we'll be back next week. And next week, I think, will be the conclusion of chapter 10, which means we would have finished the book. Which
That's right.
would be remarkable. When I still remember when we set out to do this, we thought it would take 10 weeks. And here we are, 20-something episodes later. So,
and next week is the immortality of the soul. So, yeah, if you thought this week was heavy, forget about it.
Yeah.
This week was a lightweight compared to next week.
It's just the entree.
But anyway, for those listening, thanks for rejoining, and Happy New Year. And we hope 2022 is better than what 2021 was. But, you know, the world's doing its thing, and I think we just got to get used to things being a little bit different than how they used to be, and finding the new normal. So that's
Ugh, I hate that saying.
the new normal.
Yeah, the new normal. Piss off.
I
Alright,
would like to have the old normal, but where we just know that everyone gets a week off once or twice a year with some virus, rather than a week or two off every year with industrial diarrhea. So I think people will be legitimately not spending their sick leave now, rather than using it whenever they can to go to the cricket or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, the Republic wasn't built in a day, and neither are middle-aged men. And thanks for sticking with us, and we hope to have more fun this year. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
See you, boys.
See you later.